I go back to where we had crank telephones or no telephones at all in an area. And telephone service was multi-party service at that. And then we went through a big construction phase to make multi-party service into single-party service. And then we converted everything to digital. And today we're in a era where it's called the internet. And sometimes this voice over internet protocol is how the telephone service is provided. Each time those challenges were around, it kind of pushed us along as a government entity on what are we going to do? And we had the finding at the time that there was a divide. It's been called the digital divide, but prior to that, back in the earlier days when it was multi-party service or no service or the old magneto telephones, you couldn't do business in the community if you had some of those services that were lacking something. In other words, a cranker telephone, a multi-party telephone, you couldn't call the bank because other people were listening in on the conversation. You couldn't do business. The banker couldn't do business. And so we needed to expand those facilities to keep that divide from happening of those that didn't have the stuff and those that did have the stuff. And that continues today. That's what some of our discussion has been on broadband, particularly in these days. Is there are locations where we don't have the speed or we don't have broadband at all, and that limits what people can do or what businesses can do, and it gives a divide. And particularly in rural areas, that's important, because if the kids get off the school bus and they can't do their homework, that's a problem. If you get a notice from the credit card company and you try phoning them, they want you to do something online. Maybe you can't. RUS has been around since 1934 as REA. Our telecom program's been around since 1949. We're very small. We're a very tiny federal agency. There's 24 people like me in the telecom program around the various states. I serve Louisiana and Arkansas. I sound like I'm a Yankee. I grew up in Northern Illinois. I'm actually a Central Louisiana family. My great uncle knew a developer in North Little Rock. This is just an aside. He named a street after my great uncle. So if ever you've been to McCain Mall or McCain Boulevard, that's my family. Okay, so I'm a Central Louisiana family. I'm the dinosaur. I go back 45 years. And everything I tell you about is going to be on the website. And all you have to do is go to www. And my wife's grandmother thought that was a wrestling federation, but that's, of course, the internet. rd.usda.gov. That's all it is, rd.usda.gov. And when you're there, you click up at the top program and services, and you click on telecommunications, and you scroll down and you'll find 4 programs. And you click on which one you want. 2 of them I'll skim over today. Telecommunications Infrastructure Program. That's our hallmark program. We loan money to rural independent telephone companies who are doing what? Fiber to the home. In some of the areas that are served by the rural independent companies, they have built fiber to the home networks. There's a couple of those networks in the state of Arkansas where all the customers have fiber to the home and speed is not a problem. So we loan money to those companies. We also have a second program that I'm just going to skim over but mention. We've got a grant program that provides money for schools, hospitals, and other entities. It's called Distance Learning Telemedicine, and it provides the equipment to connect to the telecommunications infrastructure to provide, guess what, distance learning and or telemedicine. So we can have teachers in one location teaching students in other locations over high-speed networks. We can have patients in one location being treated by doctors or where x-rays are being read at a remote location because of teleradiology or telemedicine. We've got a system just down the street here at Baptist Health that was funded with one of the grants a couple years ago. It's called EICU. And they've got a place at Baptist that is monitoring ICU patients in rural hospitals. And the computer's doing profiling, and oftentimes the doctor there is calling a nurse in a rural hospital saying, go down to bed number 2. This is about to happen. And it's saving lives in rural hospitals. That grant window is presently open. It's about another 45 days in that grant window. We've got $27 million a year in that program for grants. We do have funding, though, for broadband. And our funding for broadband, aside from the rural independent telephone companies, comes in the form of grants and it comes in the form of loans. The grants are something when you click down halfway down that page, rd.usda.gov, programs and services, telecommunications, go halfway down the page and you click on Community Connect. There's a grant program, about $10 million a year, and grants are available for areas that have no service whatsoever under the definition that's in the notice. This year's definition was 4 down, 1 up. And so if an area has no service, they would be eligible for a grant. What's an area? An area is a contiguous geographic area that you can draw a shape around. Although it could have some gaps, could look like Swiss cheese. Doesn't have to be a town, it just can be an area where there's no service by that definition. Very simple application, and grant funds are awarded nationwide on a competitive scoring basis. So no providers, that means a telephone company, cable company, cellular company with a 4G network can't have any service in the area of 4x1. We have a number of grants in the state. We've got grants in small places that maybe Chittister, Reeder, Wheeling Springs, Jerome, a couple areas south of Marietta, Rondo, Aubrey, that have received those grants, and that service has been there under that program. Okay, we also have a loan program. It's called a Farm Bill Broadband Loan Program. It was announced about a year ago. We've had a little bit of an eligibility problem with it because of how Congress has given the eligibility requirements and their scoring deadlines. And so in the first year, the first 2 rounds of applications, nobody qualified in the eligibility area. We said we got to do something about it. And so we have 6 of our field reps that have been trained in order to assist an applicant in getting an eligible application filed. I am one of the 6. And so we can assist up to the time when they submit the application in making sure an application is eligible. The broadband loan program, Treasury rate loans for a term of the useful life of service. Oftentimes that's for wireless, it could be around 12 years. For fiber to the home could be around 20 years. A Treasury rate, which last week was 2.62% for the duration of the loan period. The loans have to be certain feasibility tests met with them. They can, under the last notice, go up to $10 million in a loan amount. So we can make loans to rural areas where there are existing providers. The definition under the loan program is 25/3. And so if there are competitors at that speed, we can make a loan where there's 1, where there's 2, but not where there's 3 competitors. If it's under 25/3 or the provider does not furnish service to more than 5% of the households, they're not considered a competitor in the area. So we can provide loans for areas that are needing broadband service. Now the question is, who can be an applicant? And the applicants can be just about anyone as long as they furnish a feasibility in the application. We have startups that apply. We have existing companies that apply. And the question who can apply is oftentimes asked. I'll get a call from a community or an area and they say, we don't have service, or we feel we're underserved and we need additional service. How can we go about this? Well, I explained the program, and then they said, well, who can do this for us? And I tell them, well, I can't really answer the question because the question is very much locally based. Instead, I use an illustration. A man's walking through a field, he stubs his toe, he uncovers and he finds that it's not a rock, but rather it's a gem that he's uncovered. Now he's got to make a choice with the gem. He can keep the gem to himself and he can use the value of it, or he can go and get others to help with it, maybe shine it, split it up or whatever, and change the value of it that way. but it's his choice as to what he does with it. The same thing with rural infrastructure. One can choose to try and do it oneself, and that's a very valid answer. One can form a cooperative and do it with others, or one can go and ask for assistance from somebody that's a possibility for being a provider. And maybe the existing people there aren't interested, but somebody else may be interested in coming into the area. It may be an electric cooperative. It may be an infrastructure company that's doing fixed wireless. It may be another company that can come into the area, or it may be just a self-started home-brewed project. In each of the programs, there is a match required. In the grant program, there's a 15% match. In the loan program, there's a 10% equity requirement. Not a cash match, but equity. So it could be in the case of an existing company, they have that equity. In the case of a startup, they need to provide it in the form of cash. So we've got the money is here. In the grant program, there's around $10 million a year. In the loan program, there's $47 million right now nationwide, and we may get more in the upcoming budget. We don't know.